Hello, night traveler. Set your worries on the windowsill and let the day exhale. Rain hushes your rooftop in slow, patient syllables, and blankets grow heavy with warmth. Sleep is almost here, so close you can taste its cool copper hush when the air tilts and everything shifts. The scent arrives, first beeswax, wormwood, and the faintest whisper of mercury. You open your eyes, yet somehow they're not your own room's familiar lines. Instead, you stand beneath a winter violet sky on the edge of the Thames. Before you rises Mortlake Manor, Dr. John Dee's house of hidden stars. Lanterns tremble on their hooks, drawing topaz glints across diamond-paned windows rimed with frost. You glance down, coarse wool, hand-dyed indigo clings to your shoulders. A breath of river mist fogs the lantern glass in your fist. Gravel crunches under unfamiliar boots as you approach a wrought-iron gate, its latch forged in the curve of an Ouroboros, forever devouring its own tail. Dreams are polite, so you lift the ring. Groan. The gate swings half warning, half welcome. Bare apple branches rattle overhead while the door of Baltic oak looms. You rap once, boom, and centuries echo up your arm. Instantly, the door opens of its own accord, releasing warm air rich with candle smoke and the silent fizz of unseen furnaces. A tall, lean figure steps from the glow robe, black as spilled ink beard, silver as first frost. Rings etched with angelic sigils flash like distant constellations. "Welcome, wandering pupil." John Dee murmurs, voice soft as vellum pages turning. Tonight Saturn leans toward Jupiter, a narrow window when the heavens answer plainly. Come, let the embers warm your doubts. You cross the threshold. Glass retorts glimmer, charts of lunar libration hover like captured orbits. Then footsteps brisk and unapologetic. A broad-shouldered man strides in cloak dripping rain, a leather satchel clinking with forbidden promises. He doffs a fur cap, straw-colored hair escaping in unruly tufts, and grins. "Apologies," Dr. Edward Kelley says, producing a stoppered vial of crimson dust. "Our favorite apothecary demanded 3 florins for this red lion." I assured him, "Souls are cheaper on Thursdays." Dee arches an eyebrow, equal parts censure and delight, while the vial glows ruby in the firelight. The room seems to inhale. You feel the thrum of possibilities, gold or gallows, revelation or ruin. Kelly's eyes meet yours. "Stay close," he winks. Dreams have poor footing on wet stone. And so you stand between a stargazer who speaks to angels and an alchemist who gambles with dragon's blood on a night when London sleeps and the cosmos leans in to listen. This is sleep among titans. If your eyes remain open, you've arrived at exactly the right hour. If they drift closed, perfect, the crucible will cool while you dream. Should these embers bring you rest, leave a whispered thought below or light a lantern of subscription so the next midnight gate may unbolt for you. The story will wait patient as mercury in glass until you return. The night outside Mortlake Manor deepens a velvet cloak, stitched with the distant steady drumming of rain. But within these ancient walls, illuminated by the tremulous glow of a single brazier, a different kind of night unfurls. This is not the night of quiet slumber, but the restless buzzing hours of the alchemist's laboratory, a realm where dreams of gold and immortality collide with a harsh, often perilous reality. Here the very air hums with the silent fizz of unseen furnaces, and the boundary between genius and folly, between revelation and ruin blurs with every shimmering retort. "Welcome, wandering pupil." Dr. John Dee's voice murmurs, his silver beard catching the firelight. "You think that turning lead to gold is an easy pursuit, don't you? A mere flick of the wrist, perhaps, or a whispered incantation? Come closer, then. Do not fear the scent. It is the very aroma of hope and failure mingled inextricably with the sharp tang of sulfur. As one who has dedicated his entire life to the relentless pursuit of knowledge, to deciphering the hidden language of the cosmos and the whispered secrets of creation, I can assure you that life within these arcane laboratories is far less gleaming than one might imagine. Every breath drawn here is a gamble, every tremor of the glass a testament to the risks we willingly court." He gestures with a hand adorned with rings etched with angelic sigils, inviting you further into the warmth. Immediately upon entering an alchemical laboratory, your olfactory sense, perhaps dulled by the mundane sense of your own time, will awaken to a symphony of pungency. You will grow accustomed to the pervasive, almost suffocating aroma of sulfur, a smell both acrid and strangely compelling, clinging to everything like a persistent, unwelcome spirit. It is, I often quip, the eau de toilette of our peculiar profession. Indeed, it penetrates everything: your woolen cloak, your very skin, and even, I suspect, the inner chambers of your dreams, a constant low-burning reminder of the dangerous elements we coax into submission. Then there is the chilling metallic breath of mercury, a scent so distinct, so cold, it promises both the elusive balm of healing and the swift, silent embrace of death. It is the liquid quicksilver of our ambitions, alluring and utterly treacherous. And alcohol, of course. Always the sharp, heady presence of spirits, distilled and potent, hovering in the air, eager to ignite with the slightest spark. They are, shall we say, rather spirited companions. But beyond these more common companions of the alchemist's art, there are other less palatable aromas. Our more esoteric formulae, those borrowed from ancient texts and the more obscure corners of natural philosophy, sometimes demand ingredients of a truly unconventional nature. The pungent, earthy reek of animal dung used in certain arcane processes to generate a specific kind of heat or fermentation can hang heavy in the air, rendering the very atmosphere thick with its undeniable presence. And inevitably the bitter, acrid stench of a failed experiment, a burnt residue, a broken promise, the ghost of a transformation that never was. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth herself, on one of her rare, shall we say, curious visits to my more experimental chambers, once inquired, with a rather delicate wrinkle of her nose, about my distinctive scent. I merely bowed and attributed it to the arduous pursuit of philosophical truth. She seemed politely unconvinced. He turns his gaze sweeping over the array of equipment. Along with these formidable scents, the very architecture of sound within the laboratory orchestrates a peculiar, persistent symphony. There is the continuous, delicate clatter of our glass instruments, the intricately crafted alembics, their long necks reaching towards the heavens, and the bulbous retorts patiently awaiting their transformative contents. They chime softly against each other as we move, a constant, fragile accompaniment to our work. Then the gentle, hypnotic gurgle and hiss of liquids boiling within their sealed vessels, each bubble a tiny, pregnant promise of the gold or elixir to come. The unceasing crackle and lick of the flames in the athanor, our alchemical furnace, a tireless heart of our operations, maintaining a steady, unwavering heat for days, sometimes weeks on end, and the heavy rhythmic thud and scrape of the mortar and pestle as we patiently grind stubborn minerals and earths into the fine receptive powders our work demands. It is, we tell ourselves, a symphony of controlled chaos, or at least we desperately try to convince ourselves of its order. I have heard these sounds reverberating in my dreams, or perhaps I am simply living within a dream, and these are its persistent auditory contours. It is often difficult to discern the boundary, particularly after many sleepless nights by the furnace, and these instruments, my dear pupil, are not merely tools. They are extensions of our will, our fragile glass and metal servants in the grand pursuit. The alembic, with its distinctive cap and downward sloping beak, is designed to capture and condense the purest essence of our concoctions, separating the volatile from the fixed, the spirit from the dross. The retort, a simpler, more robust flask, is often used for harsher distillations, its sturdy form enduring the most violent of chemical reactions. The mortar and pestle, humble yet indispensable, are where the very substance of the earth is broken down, reduced to its primal form, ready for its alchemical rebirth. And the athanor, the athanor. This is the very heart, the philosophical furnace, a constant source of heat that simulates the slow, patient processes of nature itself, where matter is said to ripen and perfect over time. It is a tireless companion, demanding constant attention, yet offering the promise of profound transformation. But this grand orchestra of ambition, this meticulous dance with the elements, is fraught with peril. We handle substances of profound toxicity without the benefit of your modern elaborate protections. Mercury, arsenic, antimony. Their beauty is deceptive, their touch insidious. A single misplaced drop of mercury can ruin not merely a week's painstaking work, but potentially the remainder of your life. Its vapors, subtle and odorless, can cloud the mind, weaken the body, and lead to a slow, insidious decline. Indeed, Edward, my tireless and at times exasperating associate, had a rather unforgettable experience with it early in our partnership. He found himself rather unsteady on his feet for a fortnight, and his visions, which were usually quite vivid, took on an unsettlingly green hue. He claimed it was a message from an emerald angel. I suspected mercury poisoning. The line, as you see, is often a matter of interpretation. Dr. D pauses, his eyes fixed on a bubbling flask. Then there is the ever-present threat of fire. Alcohol in its pure distilled form is a willing servant but a dangerous master. A single careless flicker of a candle, a rogue ember from the Athanor, a sudden, unexpected reaction. And what was a controlled distillation can swiftly become an uncontrolled conflagration. We count ourselves fortunate, truly fortunate, if we merely lose an eyebrow in an evening's work. I recall one particularly vivid occasion during a delicate phase of our great work when a minor miscalculation, a momentary lapse in my own meticulous attention, led to a sudden violent chemical reaction. The resulting flash of flame, though brief, was intense enough to scorch the ceiling beams and send a shower of sparks dangerously close to my most precious collection of ancient manuscripts. It was terrifying. The thought of my library, my life's accumulation of knowledge, consumed in a fiery embrace. Well, it still causes a cold knot in my stomach. Edward Kelley steps forward, a wry smirk on his lips, wiping a smudge of something dark from his hand. Conflagration, Master D, that was merely an evening of spirited activity. A spontaneous fireworks display, I call it. That smoke still haunts me, clinging to my clothes, my hair, even the memory of my dreams. We had to scrape the soot from the ceiling, and the acrid smell lingered for days, but at least we learned that one shouldn't mix strong spirits with acids quite in that manner. A costly lesson, both in florins and my eyebrows. These eyebrows, they seem rather reluctant to grow back. And speaking of which, that vial of red medicine I brought, Doctor, it still glows ruby in the firelight like a promise, doesn't it? His grin fades as he looks to Dr. D, a silent acknowledgement of the meticulous, often monotonous rhythm that governs their days and nights. Ah, yes. The relentless march of time. Dr. D sighs, his voice taking on a slightly wearier tone. Alchemy demands a patience that few outside our pursuit could comprehend. These are not hasty experiments, my dear pupil, but processes that unfold over weeks, even months. You spend hours, endless hours, simply watching a retort simmer, observing the slow condensation within an alembic. The hum of the Athanor, a constant companion, marks the passage of untold nights. The laboratory never truly sleeps, and often neither do we. Your eyes, once keen for the faintest glint of morning light, will grow accustomed to the dim flickering illumination of oil lamps and furnace glow. And slowly, imperceptibly, they will begin to blur, softened by the strain, perhaps by the vapors, perhaps by the sheer unblinking focus required. He pauses, a faint, almost wistful smile touching his lips. I confess, still waiting for the Philosopher's Stone to reveal itself. It has been promised for a very long time. Kelley scoffs lightly, a cynical gleam in his eye. And who, pray tell, pays for this endless waiting? Master D, gold may be the aim, but iron and copper are the daily reality, bought and consumed in vast quantities. These seekers of truth, well, they have a remarkable knack for emptying a royal purse. Truly, one wonders if they are not more adept at turning gold into nothing. And unfortunately, the Queen, bless her impatient heart, is not always known for her boundless patience. Every vial, every crucible, every exotic herb from distant lands costs a fortune that must be replenished often by the very promise of the gold we are so diligently failing to produce. "Oh, money," Kelley exclaims, running a hand through his unruly hair. "I have seen more men hanged for lack of coin than for lack of talent. A true alchemist without a patron is like a fire without oxygen, destined to dwindle and die. And a patron without gold is like an empty sack. Sooner or later they will find a way for you to disappear, to conveniently forget your existence. Believe me, the nobility have rather efficient methods of ensuring inconvenient failures cease to be inconvenient. Dr. D nods slowly, his gaze distant, as if observing a complex celestial chart. Beyond the financial burdens, there is the profound, gnawing isolation. Our knowledge, our very existence, must remain shrouded in secrecy. We live a life of constant concealment, our discoveries whispered in coded language, our insights recorded in cryptic symbols. The very essence of our craft demands it. Each closed door is a promise unspoken, a barrier against the curious, the envious, and the dangerously orthodox. And every promise unfulfilled, every secret betrayed, can lead to a most unwelcome visit from the Holy Inquisition, or from those who simply desire your secrets for their own nefarious purposes. Kelley lets out a dry, humorless chuckle. Ah, the Inquisition. They have a rather keen interest in anything that smells too much of progress or too little of their sanctioned incense. The line between true science and mere sorcery is perilously thin, my friend, and easily blurred by a fearful populace or a malicious accuser. Our work, often intertwined with the movements of the stars, with the subtle influences of the planets, and the dubious art of divination, only makes us more suspect. A single misaligned star, a misinterpreted omen, can cost you years of diligent research, or your head. The Inquisition, I assure you, cares little for your planetary alignments or your grand theories of the cosmos. They care only for the state of your soul, and whether it aligns with their particular celestial mapping. Dr. D's voice softens, becoming almost a murmur, blending with the steady drum of the rain outside. And so it goes. Night after night we toil, breathing in the mingled sense of hope and despair. We live in a constant state of calculated risk, knowing that each experiment, each delicate manipulation of the elements could be our greatest breakthrough, a moment of profound revelation that changes the very course of human understanding. Or it could be the abrupt, fiery end of our existence, a flash of light followed by eternal darkness. Kelley leans closer, his eyes sharp and knowing, meeting yours in the dim glow. A life worth dreaming about, perhaps, for those who enjoy such peculiar fantasies, but not, I assure you, a life to actually live. Trust me, I have lived enough of it to know. And what remains of my ears, or rather what doesn't, is testament enough to that truth. The scent of sulfur and the distant rattle of glassware still linger in the air as Dr. D gestures towards the larger, more orderly chamber that houses his formidable library. My life, you see, Doctor, John D begins, his voice softening, has always been a relentless quest for knowledge. A long, winding path paved with numbers traced by the stars and illuminated by the deepest secrets of the universe. I am at my core a mathematician, an astronomer, a geographer of both earthly and celestial realms, and a trusted, if sometimes peculiar, counselor to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I. He pauses, a faint, almost beatific smile gracing his lips. I believed and still believe that all knowledge, every fragment of understanding, is but a piece of divine truth, from the most intricate mathematical theorems to the subtle glimmer of crystals reflecting the light of angels. My days were spent poring over ancient texts, grappling with the profound complexities of navigation and delving into the esoteric wisdom of Hermetic philosophy. My library indeed was my very life, a sanctuary of more than 4,000 volumes, a collection grander than many a university's, each page a whispered promise of deeper insight. He walks slowly among the towering shelves, running a hand over a leather-bound tome. Though my dedication to scholarly pursuits earned me respect among the intellectual elite, my interests often strayed beyond what was deemed conventional. My fascination with the mystical, with the more arcane branches of inquiry, often made me a figure of suspicion, even whispers of heresy. But the cosmos, my friend, held secrets far too profound to ignore, and the boundaries of human understanding far too confining. He stops by a darkened scrying mirror, its surface reflecting the flickering lantern light like liquid night. And then the trajectory of that journey shifted profoundly and irrevocably when Edward Kelley quite literally walked into my life. A man of undeniable talent, and shall we say, a remarkable multitude of hidden corners. Edward Kelley steps forward, his boots scuffing lightly on the stone floor, a glint of defiance and humor in his eyes. My background, you might say, is a touch less academic than the doctor's. A past veiled in a certain degree of mystery, perhaps, but one that certainly prepared me for seeing things others could not. I became known for my peculiar ability to scry, to gaze into a crystal ball or a polished black mirror and communicate with what I perceived as supernatural entities. Angels, some called them. Others less charitably called them something else entirely. He shrugs, a flicker of that earlier mischief returning. I was the doctor's bridge to the spirit world, you see. I would gaze into the darkness, and the voices, the images would come to me. And the doctor, bless his studious heart, would diligently record every single word. Every single, often frustratingly enigmatic word. Dr. D nods in quiet agreement. Edward was indeed my eyes into a realm I could only theorize about, a world of pure spirit that remained tantalizingly beyond my mortal grasp. He claimed he could hear voices that I, for all my learning, could not. And so I recorded every utterance, every cryptic message, every strange pronouncement. It was a rigorous, demanding process, one that held the promise of ultimate knowledge. Oh, those voices, Kelley interjects, running a hand over the scrying mirror. They were not always clear, Master D, far from it. Sometimes they demanded peculiar things, peculiar sacrifices, peculiar rituals, and sometimes they merely wanted gold, lots and lots of gold. I tried, truly I did, to convey their messages as faithfully as possible, but interpreting the nuanced language of angels for a meticulous scholar who saw every detail as a profound cosmic truth, well, that was never an easy task. And frankly, some of their demands were utterly absurd. You can't imagine. Their collaboration, though profoundly fruitful in its output of dense coded manuscripts, was a relationship built on a fascinating, often volatile mutual dependency. Dr. D, the towering intellect, needed Kelley's unique, almost uncanny ability to bridge the gap between their world and the spiritual realms. Kelley, in turn, needed D's vast knowledge, his academic rigor, and perhaps most crucially, his esteemed patronage and unwavering belief to lend credibility to his visions. But this was no placid partnership. There was a constant underlying tension. Kelley, ever the pragmatist, was frequently swayed by the temptations of earthly wealth and popular acclaim, while Dr. D was consumed by the pure, unadulterated pursuit of knowledge. Kelley's focus often drifted to more tangible rewards. This divergence, a subtle crack in their shared foundation, would only deepen with time hinting at future discord. Our quest for knowledge and for answers eventually led us beyond the familiar shores of England. Dr. D continues, a shadow passing over his face. We departed our homeland, seeking new patronage, new opportunities to continue our work on the continent. Our journey took us across Europe, from the bustling courts of Bohemia to the quiet academic centers of Poland. Our reputation, though often whispered and sometimes reviled, had preceded us, attracting the attention of various rulers. Most notably, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a monarch with an almost insatiable fascination for alchemy and all things arcane, invited us to his court in Prague. He promised great patronage, unlimited resources for our shared pursuit of the ultimate truth. Kelley steps closer, his earlier cynicism returning. Ah, Emperor Rudolph. A magnificent patron, if you didn't mind the endless nights spent trying to convince him that we weren't simply charlatans, and that turning base metals into gold truly takes time, a considerable amount of time. The pressure, you see, was immense. Each new court, each new noble demanded proof, tangible results for their coin and their patience. And when those results were elusive, the promises became grander, the risks more perilous. The air in the laboratory thickens with the weight of these memories, hinting at the trials and triumphs, the deceptions and desperate hopes that awaited them on their grand European journey. You find yourself leaning in, drawn by the quiet desperation in D's scholarly voice and the sharp knowing edge in Kelley's more worldly tone. What unforeseen challenges awaited them in those foreign courts? What secrets would they uncover, and what price would they pay for the pursuit of forbidden knowledge? Doctor. D's gaze drifts from the scrying mirror, now a dark, silent pool, to a dusty, travel-worn trunk in the corner of the laboratory. Our quest for knowledge and for answers eventually led us beyond the familiar shores of England. We departed our homeland not with eager hearts, but with a sense of grim necessity, seeking new patronage, new opportunities to continue our great work on the continent. We carried with us precious books, our essential instruments, and the vast, often burdensome weight of our hopes. Our journey took us across Europe, from the bustling courts of Bohemia to the quiet academic centers of Poland. Our reputation, though often whispered and sometimes reviled, had preceded us, attracting the attention of various rulers. Most notably the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a monarch with an almost insatiable fascination for alchemy, and all things arcane, extended an invitation to his court in Prague. He promised great patronage, unlimited resources for our shared pursuit of the ultimate truth. He claimed to care deeply about our work, perhaps too deeply. Edward Kelley's eyes narrow, a bitter amusement playing on his lips. Ah, Emperor Rudolph. A magnificent patron in theory. If you didn't mind the endless nights spent trying to convince him that we weren't simply charlatans, that we weren't just entertainers for his bored court, and that turning base metals into gold truly takes time. A considerable amount of time. The pressure, you see, was immense. Each new court, each new noble demanded proof, tangible results for their coin and their patience. And when those results were elusive, the promises became grander, the risks more perilous. Rudolph wanted to witness transformations, not just hear about the process. He wasn't content with the philosophical implications. He wanted solid gold delivered on a platter. Dr. D sighs a deep, weary sound. The demands grew, and with them the cracks in our own peculiar alliance began to show. The messages from the angels channeled through Edward's unique sight grew increasingly challenging. There were disputes, disagreements, and ultimately a demand so profound, so utterly unthinkable that it fractured the very foundation of our bond. A divine instruction to share our wives. A test of faith, the angels insisted. A test I could barely comprehend, much less accept, yet Edward, in his fervent belief, or perhaps his desperate yearning for the ultimate secret, felt compelled to obey. Kelley looks away, a flicker of something unreadable. Shame, regret, defiance in his eyes. The allure of gold, the tantalizing whisper of immortality, the desperate craving for recognition. They are powerful forces, my friend. They can corrupt the purest of intentions. The angels offered visions of boundless wealth, of power beyond measure. And when a man is constantly living on the edge, one learns to grasp at any perceived certainty, no matter how unconventional. I pursued my own path, drawn by the promise of immediate, tangible results. I sought out other patrons, other opportunities, believing I held the key to the ultimate secret within my grasp. But the path of ambition, unguided by true wisdom, often leads to a precipice. Dr. D's voice is hushed, a lament in the quiet room. Edward's fascination with power and worldly gain, his reckless pursuit of secrets, ultimately led him down a dangerous road. He claimed to have found the Philosopher's Stone, to have mastered the art of transmutation. His reputation for a time soared, but such claims attract dangerous attention. He was arrested, imprisoned, and ultimately, in a desperate attempt to escape his confinement, he fell from a prison wall, dying from his injuries. A tragic, ignominious end for a man of such singular abilities. The aged scholar's shoulders slump, and he gazes into the dying embers of the Athenor. Edward is gone. He took with him his secrets, his dubious promises, and perhaps a few fragments of my own sanity. I had lost a friend, a collaborator, and a part of myself that night. My solitary search for knowledge, for the unifying truths of the cosmos, became infinitely more lonely. The grand shared vision we once held, that beautiful, fragile dream of unlocking creation's deepest mysteries, it shattered with his fall. Kelley's voice, now a spectral echo in the quiet chamber, seems to rise from the very shadows. We were a strange pair, weren't we? The scholar and the scoundrel, the genius and the rogue, the seeker and the charlatan. But we searched for something together. And I suppose in the twisted world of alchemy, sometimes the search itself is enough. Sometimes the journey, for all its perils and absurdities, is the only treasure. Although I still would have preferred the gold. He pauses, and a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of air seems to caress your ear. And my ears. I still miss my ears. Remember that, night traveler. The costs of this pursuit are not always measured in coin or glory. Stay close. What more can this quiet night reveal about such dangerous quests? And what other parts of the story lie hidden beneath the ashes of forgotten experiments? You softly follow John Dee and Edward Kelley as they drift from the flickering laboratory light into a grander chamber where towering bookshelves brush against the dark ceiling. The scent of old vellum and dried ink hangs heavy here, replacing the sharp tang of chemicals. Edward Kelley nudges your arm gently, his eyes glinting with a mischievous light as John Dee pauses before a table laden with ancient manuscripts and faded astrological charts. Dr. Dee, you begin softly, your voice barely a whisper in the hallowed quiet, as if afraid to disturb the silent wisdom held within the room. We've spoken of the risks, the smells, and the dangerous chemicals, but all this striving, it was directed towards one ultimate goal, wasn't it? The grand secret. What they called the Philosopher's Stone. John Dee turns his gaze meeting yours, his voice a low, thoughtful hum, like the rustle of ancient parchment. Ah, yes, you touch upon the very heart of our great work. You have heard the whispered tales of gold and of the elixir of life, no doubt. But the true heart of alchemy, my dear pupil, lies in something far more profound, a mystery that has haunted the greatest minds for centuries, the Philosopher's Stone. It is not, I assure you, a gleaming jewel as your poets might describe. I have dedicated countless hours, untold nights, deciphering ancient texts, seeking the subtlest clues to its nature, its very existence. It is the pinnacle of the magnum opus, the ultimate achievement of alchemical pursuit, a substance believed to possess two primary, almost miraculous capabilities. Firstly, the ability to transmute base metals such as lead into pure gold, a perfect conversion, a material apotheosis. But beyond mere wealth, it promised something even grander: to create the elixir of life, a panacea capable of curing all maladies and extending life itself. It promised limitless riches and immortality. Almost too good to be true, wouldn't you agree? Dee picks up a detailed drawing of an intricate alembic, his fingers tracing its elegant lines. And you must understand, it is not a physical stone in the sense you might imagine, not a gem or a crystal to be held, certainly not something you might stumble upon in a riverbed. Rather, it is described in our texts as a substance, be it a powder, a tincture, or a clear, potent liquid possessing the power of ultimate transformation. For many, myself included, it represents a symbol for perfection itself, for purity, for the ultimate unity and harmony of all elements, both material and spiritual. The very act of striving for it, of refining one's soul alongside one's metals, was considered a path to spiritual enlightenment. Edward Kelley steps forward, his eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance, as if conjuring a vision from the very air. The stone. Oh, I have seen it in my dreams, Master Dee, countless times. It changes its form in every telling, in every vision I was granted, as if deliberately eluding capture, constantly shifting its appearance to test those who seek it. But to me, it was always a promise of freedom. Freedom from poverty, freedom from the constant agonizing dependency on the whims of unpredictable patrons, and yes, a great deal of coin. I have held it in my hands, at least within my scrying mirror's vision, and I have felt its immense power, a palpable hum that vibrated through my very being. Kelley gives a slight wry smile, a mix of cynicism and lingering longing. The stories of it. We heard them endlessly whispered in taverns and royal courts alike. The legends of alchemists of old, those who came before us, figures like Nicolas Flamel, who it was said found the stone and lived a life of quiet, ancient longevity, hidden away in unimaginable wealth and profound wisdom. Or the even older tradition's tales of ancient kings who supposedly possessed merely a single drop of this divine elixir that could turn anything into gold. The descriptions of the stone's physical appearance varied wildly, too. Some claimed it was red like dried blood pulsing with an inner fire. Others insisted it was white as freshly fallen snow radiating purity, or sometimes transparent as crystal shimmering with an inner light almost alive with its own transformative energy. It truly changed its form in every story, as if it were deliberately evading us, perhaps playing a cosmic game of hide-and-seek. Much like some of my own relatives when I ask them to repay a debt now that I think of it. Your breath hangs in the chill air of the library caught between the ancient wisdom of John Dee and the streetwise cynicism of Edward Kelley. Dee's fingers trace the faded lines of an alchemical diagram, while Kelley's eyes still hold the echo of unseen visions. The quiet hum of the Athanor from the distant laboratory seems to resonate with the very pulse of their shared impossible quest. John Dee turns from the diagram, his gaze now fixed on some internal landscape. The pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone was rarely a straightforward endeavor. It was codified often allegorically as the great work, the magnum opus. This was not a single simple experiment, but a meticulously defined complex sequence of operations believed to purify and transform matter, just as it was meant to purify the soul of the alchemist himself. It typically involved distinct stages, each marked by a specific color, guiding the practitioner through a profound process of chemical and, more importantly, spiritual metamorphosis. There was the nigredo, the blackening phase of putrefaction and decay, symbolizing the dissolution of the old form, the breaking down of base matter to its primal essence. A dark and often dispiriting stage where all seemed lost, reduced to ash and chaos. He pauses, allowing the stillness to settle. Following the blackening came the albedo, the whitening. This represented purification and cleansing, where the chaotic matter was washed, calcined, and refined, leading to a pristine silvery white substance. It was a stage of hope, of renewed purity, signaling the removal of impurities and the preparation for the final act. And then finally, the rubedo, the reddening, the glorious culmination of the entire process, signifying perfection and the ultimate birth of the stone itself. This stage was often associated with the color of the sun or the phoenix rising from the ashes, representing the full manifestation of the perfected substance. Each of these stages demanded precise temperatures, specific timing, and an intimate, almost intuitive understanding of the philosophical fire that drove the entire transformation. It was a tedious, painstaking, and often back-breaking routine, demanding not just scientific acumen, but a relentless, almost spiritual dedication. Dee looks directly at you, his eyes earnest. But beyond the mere chemical processes, the great work held a profound spiritual and philosophical meaning. It was believed that the outer material transformation mirrored an inner spiritual purification. The base metals representing the impure, unrefined soul of the alchemist were meant to be broken down, cleansed, and perfected, just as the self was to be purged of its flaws and worldly attachments. The pursuit of the stone was for many of us a path to spiritual enlightenment, a way to become closer to the divine, to achieve a higher state of being. It was a journey of self-discovery, as much as it was a chemical process, a true fusion of the terrestrial and the celestial. Or at least that's what we meticulously articulated to our patrons when the gold wasn't forthcoming. It made the prolonged delays sound far more profound and respectable, didn't it, Edward? It bought us time and sometimes a little more coin to continue our spiritual endeavors. Edward Kelley snorts a dry, dismissive sound that cuts through Dee's earnest tone. A journey of the soul. A very costly journey, and one that often wreaked something fierce. Many men, my friend, spent their entire lives pursuing this elusive stone, only to find nothing but abject poverty and the lingering, acrid smell of burnt experiments. I saw what happened to those who followed the great work, blindly chasing shadows and whispered promises without a pragmatic eye on the crucible. They lost everything, their fortunes, their health, and often their very sanity. It was not, I assure you, a happy ending for most. A grand philosophy, perhaps, but a brutal reality for the practitioner. Kelley leans against a heavy oak table, tracing a pattern in the dust with his finger, his voice growing sharper. The allure of it was intoxicating, though I won't deny that. Almost irresistible. The promise of infinite wealth, of eternal youth. It could drive men to desperate, irrational measures. And this desperation, in turn, fueled a burgeoning industry of charlatans and frauds, who I might add often prospered far more than your so-called true seekers. These were the puffers, as we called them, for the puffs of smoke and empty promises they produced. They would make grand pronouncements, perform elaborate, often dangerous parlor tricks, and then vanish with their patrons' fortunes, leaving behind only disappointment and the pungent stench of sulfur. I knew many such individuals. Some were simply tricksters, masters of illusion and human credulity. Others, I suspect, were initially true believers who had simply deluded themselves, lost in their own elaborate fantasies. It became increasingly difficult, both for us and for our wealthy patrons, to distinguish between genuine pursuit and elaborate, often malicious deception. And I myself was often accused of being one of them, you see. My past, my unconventional methods of scrying, they made me a ready target for such accusations. But I merely provided what was asked. The visions came to me. The gold well that was always a bit more elusive, wasn't it? D nods slowly, a grave expression settling on his face. Indeed. The pressure to produce the constant demand for tangible proof of our progress was immense. We were caught between the intellectual purity of our pursuit and the worldly expectations of our royal patrons. The number of failed experiments, of catastrophic accidents within these very walls, they were legion. I recall one particular incident, a rather unfortunate explosion involving a new mercury compound that left Edward temporarily deaf in one ear and convinced he was conversing with a rather irritable cherub for a full day. It turns out it was just a particularly persistent ringing, or so my more rational mind insisted. But the incident solidified my belief that while the stone promised wonders, it also demanded a heavy, often brutal price from those who sought it. And not all of us were willing or able to pay it. He walks back to the scrying mirror, his reflection shimmering faintly in its dark surface, a scholar contemplating an enigma. Yet for all the false promises and the inherent dangers, the relentless pursuit of the Philosopher's stone, the very act of reaching for the impossible, inadvertently led to profound advancements. The meticulous experiments, the constant refinement of apparatus, the alembic, the retort, the athanor, these very tools became the fundamental instruments of what would in time become modern chemistry. Our tireless efforts to understand the transformation of matter, to isolate elements, to control chemical reactions, to measure and observe the subtle interactions of substances, all of this grew from the crucible of alchemical pursuit. So, whether the stone itself truly existed or was merely a grand, unattainable ideal, it undeniably changed the world. It compelled us to question the nature of reality, to seek what lay beyond the visible, to push the boundaries of known elements and their interactions. It spurred innovations in distillation, in metallurgy, in the understanding of various compounds, a legacy that continues to resonate even in your own age, and that, my friend, is a form of gold in itself, more precious than any fleeting metal. Kelley lets out a long, slow breath, a faint, almost wistful smile touching his lips, as if the very air itself is now thick with the ghosts of ambitions past. The mystery of the Philosopher's stone still hangs in the air, you see, like a persistent wisp of smoke from our furnaces. Does it truly exist? Who can say for certain? But the relentless, maddening pursuit of it, for all its dangers and absurdities, illuminated more paths, led to more unexpected discoveries than any single gleam of actual gold ever could. And sometimes, just sometimes, the pursuit itself, the sheer audacious striving for the impossible, is the true treasure, though I still would have preferred the actual gold, mind you, and a decent set of hearing. But one cannot have everything in this life, especially when chasing impossible dreams. There are always trade-offs, always a price to pay, whether in coin, insanity, or in the very fabric of one's own body. Dr. D turns to you. His eyes, though tired, shining with an unwavering intellectual fire, a deep understanding that transcends even Kelley's cynicism. A perpetual dream, Edward. A perpetual dream. The silence that follows is profound, punctuated only by the distant rain and the slow, methodical tick of a clock somewhere deep within the manor. You feel the weight of centuries of desperate striving, of brilliant minds grappling with impossible dreams and the very real dangers that lurked in every shadow of the alchemist's quest. The air, though now clearer of chemical fumes, is thick with untold stories, with the echoes of whispers and frustrated sighs. The distant clock from Mortlake Village strikes a low, mournful bell, its chimes echoing the silence that has settled between the last words about the Philosopher's stone. The air, though no longer thick with chemical fumes, seems to hum with the lingering resonance of impossible dreams and bitter realities. John D. stands by the scrying mirror, his gaze lost in its dark depths. a figure of profound contemplation. Edward Kelley, ever restless, paces the worn floorboards, his earlier bravado tinged with a subtle melancholy. The great quest, it seems, touched every corner of their lives, even the most mundane. You might imagine, Dr. D's voice cuts through the quiet, a faint, almost wry smile touching his lips as he turns from the mirror, that our lives were solely consumed by the grand equations of the cosmos, by the meticulous weighing of mercury and sulfur, by the relentless hum of the Athanor. One might picture us as ceaselessly engaged in profound philosophical discourse or the dizzying alchemy of the laboratory, and indeed much of our existence was dedicated to such pursuits. But even amidst the greatest mysteries, the most ambitious undertakings mundane life, I assure you, still makes its peculiar demands. And Edward here, well, he possessed a singular talent for transforming even the simplest daily routines into, shall we say, a fresh set of challenges. He glances at Kelley, who merely grunts in acknowledgement, stretching his broad shoulders. Edward, for instance, had a rather unconventional relationship with the sun and the moon. His sleep, much like his scrying visions, adhered to no earthly schedule, responding instead to unseen currents and whispered urgings from the ether. He would often awaken with an abruptness that could startle a drowsing sentinel at the most ungodly hours, the dead of midnight, or perhaps the pre-dawn stillness when only owls and anxious scholars are awake. He claimed the angels, those celestial messengers whose voices he alone could perceive, preferred to communicate during these peculiar intervals. And so, amidst my own fitful attempts at rest, I would often hear the soft pad of his bare feet on the wooden floor, the low murmur of his voice engaging in what sounded suspiciously like a cosmic argument, and the scratch of his quill as he frantically transcribed these irregular visitations. He adhered to no common clock, only to the enigmatic prompts of his ethereal guides. A scholar like myself, one who values order and the diligent charting of the heavens, found this quite taxing. My own sleep, a fragile guest at the best of times, was frequently fractured by the insistence of these divine appointments. I often found myself rising to relight a sputtering lamp or to silently prepare a fresh parchment for his hasty scribblings, wishing just for a moment that the celestial beings might consider a more civilized hour for their pronouncements. Edward, you see, was never one to be bound by the terrestrial rhythms of day and night. His very being seemed to thrum with a different pulse when attuned to hidden energies and unseen messages. And while I strove to bring order to the chaos of the universe, Edward thrived, or at least survived within a chaos all his own. Kelley chuckles a low rumbling sound as he casts a knowing look at you. Oh, the doctor loved his order, didn't he? Thought the very universe would unravel if a quill was out of place. But the angels, they don't care for tidy schedules. And as for meals... He shakes his head, a look of mock despair on his face. Master D here believed in what he called philosophical sustenance, usually some dry bread, perhaps a meager piece of cheese and water, all consumed with a look of profound contemplation, as if debating the very essence of the crumb. I, on the other hand, am a man of more substantial needs. My soul, if it can be called such, requires meat. Warm roasted meat, a tankard of ale, something to keep the inner furnace burning bright. One cannot converse with demanding angels on an empty stomach and expect to maintain one's composure, let alone decipher their cryptic pronouncements. My visions, I assure you, were far clearer after a proper mutton pie. But the doctor would merely sigh, offering me a lecture on the virtues of temperance and the purity of a simple, unadorned diet. It was, I swear, enough to drive a man to seek gold not for wealth, but for a simple, solitary roasted chicken. Indeed, D murmurs, a faint smile playing on his lips. Edward's practical appetites often clashed with my more austere inclinations. He believed in the immediate, the tangible, while I sought the ethereal, the abstract. This extended to our very beings. I, as you may observe, maintained a certain meticulousness in my attire, believing that order in one's person reflected order in one's mind. Edward, however, seemed to view such concerns as trivial distractions from the grander, more pressing matters of the spirit world. His cloak, perpetually damp from the London mist, often bore the marks of various alchemical spills, and his hair, bless its unruly nature, seemed to possess a will entirely independent of any comb or brush. He embraced a certain natural state of being, shall we say, that often required a rather robust airing of his garments near the furnace. He would often quip, "Master D believes in the purity of the soul. I believe in the warmth of an unwashed cloak." A statement, I assure you, that perfectly encapsulates our divergent approaches to life. Kelley grins, revealing a gap where a tooth might once have been. And my angels, they never quite understood the doctor's obsession with numbers. He would pore over his charts, calculating planetary aspects, demanding to know the precise degree of every celestial body before he would even consider posing a question. "Edward," he would intone, "the alignment of Saturn and Jupiter is crucial for this communication." And I would simply roll my eyes. My angels, you see, did not require such elaborate celestial coordinates to send a simple message. They spoke to me directly through visions, through feelings, through the subtle shifts in the air. I believed in instinct, in the raw, unfiltered signal, while the doctor insisted on filtering everything through the intricate lens of his calculations. It was a constant source of exasperation for both of us. He'd accuse me of lacking scholarly rigor. I'd accuse him of overthinking a perfectly good divine prompt. Sometimes I swear I'd make up a detail just to see if he'd try to fit it into his astronomical tables. D shakes his head slowly, a hint of weariness in his voice. Edward also possessed a rather alarming habit of vanishing. At times these disappearances were practical, born of his constant need to procure rare ingredients or to evade certain persistent creditors. At other times he would simply abruptly leave our work to pursue a sudden vision of gold, a fleeting whisper of a hidden opportunity that invariably led him down a fruitless path, only for him to return weeks later poorer, but no less convinced of his unique abilities. These sudden departures often left me to manage our delicate experiments alone, risking failure or worse, attracting unwanted attention. His erratic nature was a constant source of anxiety, a discordant note in the carefully orchestrated symphony of my studies. Kelley shrugs. A man must live Master D, and sometimes one must chase a promise, even if it dances just out of reach. Besides, sometimes I needed a break from all that thinking. It was quite draining, you know. But there were times, too, when even amidst all the chaos and the clashing personalities, we found a strange kind of camaraderie. I recall one evening during a particularly fruitless session with the scrying mirror when the angels seemed to be entirely uncooperative. The doctor, frustrated, had stormed out of the chamber muttering about celestial insolence. I, being left to my own devices, decided to entertain our newest patron, a rather dull duke who insisted on seeing a true transmutation. So I took a piece of lead, a bit of the red powder I always kept handy, and with a flourish and a well-timed puff of smoke from a concealed concoction, I made it appear to turn to gold. The duke was utterly delighted, convinced he had witnessed a miracle. The Athenor, you see, had exploded, at precisely the right moment, adding a dramatic flair. The doctor, when he returned, was livid about the smoke and the ruined experiment, but even he had to admit the duke was appeased. "A theatrical success," he grumbled, "if not a scientific one." The furnace, he had to admit, had truly released cosmic energy at the perfect instant. D gives a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Indeed, Edward possessed a certain dramatic flair. His quick wit, his ability to improvise in moments of crisis often saved us from awkward or even perilous situations. He navigated the treacherous currents of courtly expectations with a reckless charm that I, in my more scholarly pursuits, could never quite muster. And despite his many exasperating qualities, his often dubious methods, and his inconvenient penchant for pursuing every glimmer of perceived wealth, he was the only one who truly understood the profound loneliness of my own great quest. He saw the visions, however flawed or misinterpreted, that I, for all my intellectual might, could only dream of. He was there, a constant, irritating presence, but a presence nonetheless in a journey that by its very nature was profoundly solitary. We were a strange pair, weren't we? Kelley's voice drifts now softer, almost reflective, mingling with the last lingering hum from the laboratory. The scholar and the scoundrel, the genius and the rogue, the seeker and the charlatan. We clashed. We argued, we often wanted to wring each other's necks, but we searched for something together. We grappled with the same grand mysteries, pursued the same impossible dreams. And I suppose in the twisted, smoke-filled world of alchemy, sometimes the search itself is enough. Sometimes the journey, for all its perils and its absurdities, for all the loss and the disappointment, is the only treasure. Although, I still would have preferred the actual gold-mined you, and a decent set of hearing. But one cannot have everything in this life, especially when chasing impossible dreams. There are always trade-offs, always a price to pay, whether in coin, insanity, or in the very fabric of one's own body. And sometimes the price is simply an endless series of strange demands from the heavens. These oddities, these small human quirks, they were not just background noise. They were the very fabric of life for those who dared to chase the impossible, a constant reminder of their fragile humanity in the face of immense cosmic ambition. And as the hum of the furnace seems to gently pull you deeper into slumber, you wonder what other truths these strange lives held waiting to be unearthed, as the very concept of their pursuits now leads us into the perilous gilded cages of royal courts. The distant tick of the manor clock seems to slow the previous segment's echoes of personal quirks and philosophical pursuits, fading into a profound stillness. The rain outside has softened to a gentle murmur, a quiet backdrop as Dr. D and Edward Kelley turn their attention from the intimate realm of their shared eccentricities to the grand, often glittering stage of European courts. After hearing about our smoke-filled laboratories, about the perpetual scent of sulfur and the endless mundane toil, Dr. John D begins his voice taking on a new resonance, one accustomed to addressing figures of power. You might logically conclude that the nobility, the crowned heads of Europe, would distance themselves from our peculiar art. You might think they would view us with suspicion, or perhaps with an educated disdain. He pauses, a faint, almost conspiratorial smile playing on his lips. But no, quite the contrary. The powerful, you see, are drawn to mystery as moths to a flame. They adored the enigmatic allure of alchemy, the whispered promises of boundless wealth, and perhaps most enticingly, a small dose of immortality. Though it must be said they also held a rather convenient fondness for the idea of us simply disappearing if our ambitious promises failed to materialize. As a trusted advisor to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, and having navigated the treacherous waters of more than one continental court, I assure you I have witnessed both sides of that glittering coin. He gestures with a sweep of his hand, as if conjuring visions of opulent halls and demanding monarchs. Emperors, kings, queens, and the highest nobility across Europe, they were the grand patrons of alchemy, our unpredictable benefactors. My own Queen Elizabeth listened intently to my counsel, even if she occasionally raised an eyebrow at my more esoteric pursuits. But it was Emperor Rudolph II in his sprawling court at Prague who truly indulged in the full spectrum of our arts. He was a monarch, utterly captivated by the unseen, the arcane, and the transformative. I have indeed served and consulted with many of them. Those with the most unconventional minds, those who dared to gaze beyond the mundane, often proved to be the most fascinating and indeed the most generous. And sometimes, just sometimes, they would even inspire the creation of something genuinely useful, a new brilliant pigment for their artists perhaps, or a surprisingly potent remedy for a stubborn ailment, or occasionally a rather effective and potent poison. Dee's voice drops to a low cautionary tone. One had to be exceedingly careful, you understand, what one was asked to create and for what purpose. Kelley steps forward, a cynical gleam in his eye, picking a loose thread from his sleeve. Precisely, a good alchemist without a powerful patron is like a fire without oxygen, destined to dwindle and die, and often quite swiftly. And a powerful monarch without gold, without the promise of everlasting youth, well, that's like an empty purse. Sooner or later they will find a way for you to disappear, rather inconveniently. I have witnessed this grim cycle play out more times than I care to count, from London to Prague, from minor dukes to mighty emperors. The thirst for gold to finance their endless wars, to erect their magnificent palaces, to maintain their opulent lifestyles. It was insatiable. And the fear of death, the desperate craving for extended life, for true immortality that was a hunger, even deeper. Such desires turned kings into desperate seekers, and we, their alchemists, became their most precious and most precarious assets. Dee nods slowly. The reasons for this royal patronage were manifold and complex. There was, of course, the insatiable craving for gold, the literal transformation of base metals into precious gold, a means to fill coffers emptied by costly wars and extravagant displays of power. Then, the relentless pursuit of health and immortality, the dream of an elixir that could defy the very laws of nature, granting perpetual youth and immunity from disease. And for some like Emperor Rudolph, there was a genuine, almost childlike intellectual curiosity, a profound fascination with the hidden mechanisms of the universe, a desire to bridge the gap between the material and the spiritual. Or sometimes it was simply for amusement, for the sheer spectacle of it all, a grander, more dangerous form of court entertainment. A skilled alchemist, you see, could be a monarch's greatest asset, a source of unlimited wealth, a purveyor of health, a fount of secret knowledge. Or just as swiftly, he could become his most dangerous burden. The problem is, once you invited an alchemist into your royal court, they never truly left. Or at least it became exceedingly difficult for them to leave on their own voluntary terms. Kelley lets out a short, sharp laugh. The life of a court alchemist? It sounded magnificent, didn't it? Grand chambers, fine food, no more shivering in damp hovels. But trust me, my friend, it was a gilded cage, nothing more. The luxury was superficial, the pressure immense. You were expected to produce results and not just theories or philosophical musings. Real gold miraculous remedies, or at the very least truly astonishing magical displays to amuse the bored nobility. At court, everything was a performance, even the transmutation of lead into gold. I once had a king, a particularly demanding fellow, who insisted I transform sand into diamonds for his coronation ring. I presented him with a most dazzling glittering stone, a true marvel of our art, if I do say so myself. But alas, it turned to mere dust after a week. He was displeased. I am to this day still searching for a truly honest alchemist, one who can maintain a perpetual illusion of success. Dr. D's expression darkens. Beyond the immediate theatrical demands, alchemy at court often served a far more insidious purpose. It became a tool of political intrigue. The alchemist, with his knowledge of potent compounds, could be subtly employed to detect conspiracies through cunningly devised poisons or regrettably to administer them. Our skills in astrology and divination were frequently twisted to predict the downfall of rivals, to influence crucial decisions, or to uncover perceived betrayals. Conversely, we the alchemists often found ourselves tragically caught in the very web of courtly machinations we were meant to unravel. Our intimate knowledge of deadly substances, of hidden truths, made us terribly convenient targets, easily framed for any unfortunate accident that might befall a courtier. We knew too much, you see, and in a court riddled with suspicion and ambition, knowing too much could prove fatal. Kelley nods grimly. Unfortunately, we knew far too much about poisons. This often made us convenient targets. If a rival fell ill or a minister disappeared, the alchemist was always the first suspect, the ready scapegoat. It was a rather precarious position, hovering between royal favor and the hangman's noose. A true master of courtly alchemy needed not only a keen mind for chemistry, but also an even keener eye for detecting political storms. The whispers in the palace corridors could be far more dangerous than any volatile compound simmering in a retort. And the demands, they only grew. From transforming common metals to predicting wars, from concocting love potions to identifying traitors, the expectations were endless. But how much can a man truly achieve, even with the aid of the angels, when his every breath is watched and his very existence depends on the fleeting whim of a monarch? The true test, you see, was not in the laboratory, but in the treacherous dance of the court. The low hum of the Athenor from the distant laboratory seems to intensify a steady thrum beneath the quiet rain. You feel the precarious balance of their existence, caught between profound knowledge and political peril, a delicate dance on a gilded stage. The room seems to inhale, drawing you deeper into the intricate web of power, ambition, and dangerous secrets that define alchemy in the courts of Europe. What desperate measures did they resort to? You wonder, to maintain their fragile positions, and what hidden costs did such patronage truly extract? The hum of the distant Athenor seems to sigh, a low constant presence in the background, as Dr. D and Edward Kelley continue their reflections on the glittering yet perilous world of courtly alchemy. The scent of old parchment and the faint whisper of mercury still linger in the air. Indeed, the demands placed upon a court alchemist extended far beyond mere transmutation or elixirs. My role, for instance, often involved using my extensive knowledge of astrology to advise Her Majesty on crucial matters of state. I provided counsel on auspicious dates for royal journeys, calculated the astrological compatibility for potential marriage alliances for the queen, and even offered insights into the outcomes of distant battles. Knowledge in any form is power, even when it emanates from sources that others might deem questionable. But there always existed a perilous boundary between offering genuine counsel and inadvertently engaging in manipulation. The court was a viper's nest of whispers and suspicions, and one had to tread carefully to avoid being caught in its coils, or worse, being accused of attempting to control the monarch's will through arcane means. Edward Kelley steps forward, a wry smirk on his lips, picking a loose thread from his sleeve. Manipulation Master D. I called that the art of survival. We were often paraded before kings and emperors expected to perform miracles on demand. I once had to transmute mere copper into gold, right before the very eyes of a skeptical monarch using nothing but a bit of theatrical flair and some clever sleight of hand. It was a high-wire act, a constant performance under immense pressure. That my friend was a stressful business, especially when Master D here kept insisting I scry for angels, when all I truly longed for was a hot meal and a moment of peace. The angels, you see, were quite particular about their messages, but they rarely sent instructions on how to acquire a decent roasted pheasant. Dr. D nods slowly, his gaze distant, perhaps remembering tense court audiences. Our laboratories within these grand palaces were often built in secret, hidden away in secluded wings or beneath forgotten courtyards. These were not the rustic exposed workshops you might imagine, but cloistered sanctums, sometimes even disguised as chapels or libraries, their existence known only to a select few. Our personal relationships with our powerful patrons were intricate, delicate dances of trust and suspicion, often conducted through coded language and private encrypted correspondence. The secrets we shared were too volatile for common ears, too dangerous to be written plainly. Every communication was a gamble, every word carefully weighed. Kelley scoffs, a dry, bitter sound. And in these gilded cages, the distinction between a true alchemist, a genuine seeker of knowledge like Master D, and a common charlatan, a mere trickster looking to fill his pockets, became fatally blurred. The nobility in their desperate thirst for gold or immortality were often unable or unwilling to tell the difference. Many so-called puffers, those who promised gold and delivered only smoke, were caught. And those caught were often punished most severely. I've seen them. Men who sought to impress, who gambled with false promises, who were then condemned to the gallows, or worse, to the fiery stake. A brutal deterrent designed to keep ambitious but untalented fools from emptying royal coffers. I recall several who were executed, always a tedious process, but necessary apparently to maintain order, and more importantly to recoup losses for their disgruntled patrons. One simply had to keep one's head both literally and figuratively. Indeed, Edward's practical concerns were always present. Dr. D murmurs a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. I, for my part, believed passionately in the great philosophy of our art, in the profound spiritual transformation of both matter and the very soul. The quest for perfection, the symbolic journey from base lead to pure gold, was a sacred endeavor for me. But Kelley, he bless his pragmatic heart, held a much more realistic view of the immediate benefits and dangers. Kelley's eyes sparkle with a dark amusement. Oh, I believed in gold all right. And perhaps more crucially in keeping my head firmly attached to my shoulders. A velvet cloak and a gold-filled tooth do not make one a true alchemist, but they can certainly help you remain in court a little longer. I saw plenty of men who arrived with grand pronouncements and left with nothing but rope burns. So yes, I believed in gold and in self-preservation. One learned quickly that public displays were often more about survival than genuine discovery. We performed for the courts, you see. Public demonstrations of transmutation, impressive but ultimately illusory experiments designed to dazzle and impress the bored aristocracy. It was a delicate balance, convincing them of your genuine capabilities without actually producing an inconvenient excess of the actual thing they desired most. Dr. D nods, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. And such performances often blurred the lines between genuine science and mere entertainment. Alchemists at court were sometimes commissioned not just for gold, but for grand, elaborate displays that blended scientific principles with artistic flair. They designed wondrous mechanical contraptions for royal gardens, perhaps a fountain that would endlessly circulate water or a clockwork figure that told fortunes. Some were even involved in the architecture of the palaces themselves, advising on proportions and the arrangement of spaces to align with cosmic energies. Alchemy in these contexts became a form of courtly art, a spectacle designed to reflect the patron's wealth and wisdom. It allowed the alchemist a measure of freedom, a temporary reprieve from the relentless demands for actual gold. But the pressure for results, for true, undeniable miracles, always lingered beneath the surface, a silent threat in the opulent halls. Kelley stretches a weariness seeping into his movements, despite the flickering light. So you see, my friend, alchemy was never just about dusty retorts and bubbling crucibles. It was a perilous dance between hope and fear, between profound intellect and blinding superstition. It was a gamble played out under the dazzling yet utterly dangerous light of royal courts, a life worth observing certainly from a very safe distance. He nods a finality in his gesture. And now, if you'll excuse me, I must go check on the dragon in my garden. He tends to get rather restless if he isn't fed on schedule. There's always something to worry about when you're an alchemist. And a fugitive. Dr. D's gaze softens as Kelley drifts away into the shadows of the manor. The search for ultimate truth, for absolute control over nature's secrets, demands everything. And in the silent hum of these halls and the echoes of whispered promises and frustrated signs, you can still feel the weight of centuries of such striving. Now, as the last embers of our night journey begin to fade, I invite you to let these stories, these whispers of a dangerous pursuit, carry you towards a restful slumber. For in the world of dreams, even gold and eternity can find their quiet repose. And with that, the whispers of the grand court fade, leaving you in the deep, quiet stillness of Mortlake Manor at night. The air is cool and calm, carrying only the faintest, almost imagined scent of beeswax and old vellum. The only sound is the gentle whisper of your own breath, mingling with the soft murmur of the Thames outside. The intricate dance of numbers, the desperate pursuit of the stone, the peculiar demands of angels, and the perilous gambles in gilded halls, all have been shared. John Dee's earnest wisdom and Edward Kelley's sharp pragmatic wit have woven their final tapestry of tales. Now, there is only peace. Let the silence of these ancient, dust-laden halls cradle you, and allow the memory of their extraordinary, often bewildering journey to become a soft, peaceful dream of your own. Sleep well, night traveler. The crucible has cooled. Rest is here.